Friends, think about how you feel when you check how many people liked a photo you posted on Instagram, the increasing view count on your YouTube or TikTok video, the retweets on your post on Twitter. Your phone is in your hand. You may act like it's not important, but deep down, seeing those numbers go up makes you happy. And if the numbers don't increase, you think to yourself, damn, it didn't take off. Why didn't they like it? Was the angle bad? Did I write something wrong? Ah, man, if only I had written the caption like this instead, it definitely would have blown up. While you're experiencing this mental chaos, your brain actually enters a state of expecting a reward. In other words, the idea of, if I do this, I'll be rewarded. For example, the thought, if I get more likes, I'll be more accepted. And during this process, in regions of your brain like the substantia nigra and the hypothalamus, an amino acid called tyrosine is converted into another molecule called levodopa, and that molecule is then converted, via enzymes, into yet another molecule called dopamine. As the amount of dopamine in your brain increases, the emotions you feel during that reward expectation become even stronger, whipping up your desire to be rewarded. And this is exactly the mechanism that social media companies are trying to exploit. Notifications on your phone, points, and even emotional manipulation tactics are all designed to put you into a state of expecting a reward and increase your dopamine release. And the only way to stop this is dopamine fasting. Or is it? Let's take a look. With the 2010s, social media rapidly rose and left all of us addicted. In Turkey, more than 97% of young people aged 18 to 24 regularly use these devices to connect to the internet. Of course, not everyone who uses these devices is addicted, but even internet addiction alone, depending on the country, affects between 3% and 7% of the population. If we widen the scope and include things like gaming and messaging addiction, this rate rises to over 50%. But it's not just the internet or computer games. A number of behaviors that were not easily accessible 50 or 100 years ago are now far more common today. Gambling and shopping, pornography and masturbation, adrenaline addiction and novelty seeking, drug use, emotionally driven overeating. Some of these addictions did exist before, of course, but thanks to technology, they are now incredibly easy to access anytime, anywhere. The entire world's porn archive is now one click away. Even the worst food can be delivered to your door with a single tap. Everywhere is full of gambling and shopping sites. Naturally, this has resulted in an incredible increase in addiction. Seeing this problem, California-based psychiatrist Dr. Cameron Sipa developed a method he called dopamine fasting by placing the dopamine molecule, mentioned at the beginning, at the center of the issue. To understand what this method aims to do, we first need to understand what dopamine actually is. Dopamine, scientifically known as 3,4-dihydroxyphenethylamine, is a very important molecule produced in the brain and plays many roles in our body. But dopamine's most important role is acting as a neurotransmitter in the brain. That is, it helps transmit messages from one neuron to another. Through this effect, it makes us feel good, regulates body movements, plays a role in the brain's reward system, and influences many processes such as memory, mood, sleep, learning, concentration, and even milk production in women. Dopamine deficiency has been linked to many conditions such as depression, restless leg syndrome, schizophrenia, ADHD, and Parkinson's disease. But for today's video, dopamine's most important role is its function in our brain's reward system. To understand this, think of Pavlov's classic conditioning experiment. Before giving food to dogs, you ring a bell, and the dog starts associating an unrelated stimulus like the bell with food. After a few days of training, even if you ring the bell without giving food, the dog's mouth starts watering due to the expectation of receiving food. And contrary to what people who misunderstand dopamine fasting claim, dopamine is not released during the reward itself, but when you enter the expectation of a reward. In other words, the dog doesn't release dopamine while eating the food, but when it expects to get the food. This part is extremely critical Because dopamine does not make us perform addictive behaviors, nor is it released most when we engage in those behaviors. Rather, it starts being released when we enter an expectation to perform those behaviors. Therefore, if the goal is truly to control addiction via dopamine, then we must focus not on the addictive behavior itself, but on the conditions and factors that trigger it. Why does someone choose gambling at a certain hour instead of doing something else? Why does someone choose shopping instead of studying at that moment? If you want to fight addiction, this is what you need to focus on. This is actually the core principle of scientific and especially medical interventions. If a river is polluted, diving into the middle and constantly removing trash may be noble, but it's endless. The real solution is eliminating or regulating the source of pollution upstream. From this perspective, the phrase dopamine fasting is complete nonsense for two reasons. First, dopamine itself is not the cause of addiction. It's a hormone that increases the likelihood of engaging in addiction-related behaviors. Even without dopamine, addiction could still develop. It would just take longer. In fact, if dopamine fasting satisfies you, then the expectation that it will work already makes you release dopamine. Second, the term dopamine fasting gives the impression that dopamine intake is being restricted, but fasting usually refers to restricting substances taken from outside the body. You cannot fast a hormone your body produces. Calling it dopamine fasting is like saying cell division fasting or ATP fasting. Even Dr. Sipa himself admits this absurdity. In an interview with the New York Times, he says he chose the term only because it was catchy and used it as a metaphor. If you read his original LinkedIn post, the source of all this hype, you'll see that under what dopamine fasting is not. The first item says, dopamine fasting is not about reducing dopamine. It focuses on reducing impulsive behaviors. Yet many people online describe it as a method to reduce dopamine release. That's the problem. An academic paper even emphasizes that the method is completely misunderstood and misapplied due to its misleading name. And it goes on. The goal is not to eliminate all dopamine-related stimuli. You should focus only on behaviors that cause problems for you, like gambling addiction. But supporters frame dopamine as an enemy to fight, which is absurd. Without dopamine, proper learning wouldn't even be possible. The real problem is that people exaggerate these basic recommendations into unhealthy extremes. They stop talking, socializing, exercising, listening to music, eating properly. Some even refuse color TV or flash photography. None of these reduce dopamine, and dopamine fasting doesn't even recommend them. So why do people exaggerate it? Two reasons. First, a noble desire to reduce harmful behaviors, even if unsustainable long-term. Second, and far more dangerous, the attempt to increase future dopamine pleasure by deprivation. This is a maladaptive behavior and may even increase drug use risk. Long story short, dopamine fasting is based on a well-intentioned idea, but it is not revolutionary. Psychologists have been saying for decades that we need healthy distance from addictive technologies. If you think LinkedIn posts are superior to decades of research, that's fine. But make sure you truly understand what you're doing, and that fixing one behavior doesn't turn into another disorder. And if you have a serious addiction, absolutely seek professional help. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit like. See you in the next one. Take care.